So, it's been a couple of weeks since CDPR made the announcement that a new Witcher game is officially on the way. I wanted to make a video on that news in a much more timely manner than I ultimately have, but the weeks that have passed have given me a chance to watch some pretty intense arguments play out within the community, all surrounding a topic that's so controversial it makes some of the debates surrounding the Netflix show look mild in comparison. The Witcher 4, for lack of an actual name, needs a new main character, and if there's one thing we do know, it's that Geralt is unlikely to be our protagonist again anytime soon. I find the conversation surrounding this topic endlessly entertaining. It often gets very heated, and for good reason. We're talking about finding a replacement for the perfect protagonist, one that many fans are reluctant to say goodbye to, at least for the time being. It's also worth mentioning that before this recent announcement, there was always that one option for a Geralt replacement that most people agreed was at the very least a decent choice, and now that option is seemingly off the table. Of course, I'm talking about a young Vesemir as our new main character. With the teaser image showing a Lynx medallion, which has now been confirmed to indeed be a Lynx, a Vesemir prequel is almost certainly not the direction CDPR is headed unless this is some sort of misdirection, and no Vesemir kind of takes away the one option that almost everyone was at least okay with. On the topic of the Lynx medallion and what it means, before we get back to the protagonist problem, I did want to point out something from The Witcher 3 that I haven't really seen mentioned anywhere else. This might mean nothing at all, but it is interesting to me that all of the cat school gear in The Witcher 3 is labeled in the files as being from the School of the Lynx. Every single piece, from the armor to the swords to the crossbow, is called Lynx gear. If you're on PC and want to add any of the feline equipment to your inventory through console commands, you'll have to type in add item Lynx School Silver Sword, Lynx School Crossbow, etc. It's possible, maybe even likely, that the cat school and a possible Lynx school are just the same thing, or one is an offshoot of the other. A lynx is a cat, after all. I'm just saying it would be kind of odd if CDPR were to introduce a school of the Alaskan Tundra wolf when we already have the wolf school, or if they introduced a school of the snake when we already have Viper School Witchers. That one is probably a less stupid example than the school of the Alaskan Tundra wolf. We just know very little about the non-wolf Witcher school, so all I'm saying is that the Lynx medallion could easily just be one of several medallion types cat school Witchers wear, or maybe it's a simple redesign. Or if this next game is set far in the past, maybe the cat school was called the Lynx school at one point in time. Speaking of when this game will take place, that brings us back around to the protagonist discussion, which I have quite a lot to say about. I want to start with the possibility that this game is going to move the universe forward, meaning it's set after the events of The Witcher 3. If that does end up being the case, well, we might as well just get straight to the difficult part of this conversation, so let's talk about Ciri. The idea of a Ciri-centric sequel is exciting to many and horrifying to others. I see the same points being made over and over and over when it comes to those who aren't a fan of the idea. Ciri is too OP, Ciri isn't a real Witcher, Ciri has multiple endings, and how do you account for those? You've probably heard all of those arguments before, and for the most part, they're based in reality. CDPR ignoring 2 of the 3 Ciri endings would almost certainly rub some fans the wrong way, and if they are going to move forward with Ciri as a Witcher, they'd almost have to make that the established outcome for her. Also, it's correct to say that Ciri isn't exactly a Witcher in the traditional sense. She hasn't undergone the mutations that make you a Witcher, but to be fair, that doesn't stop The Witcher 3 from treating Ciri like she is a perfectly normal Witcher who has. If she visits you at the end of Blood and Wine, she describes her day-to-day life in detail, and it sounds pretty routine to what we would expect from any Witcher. In some languages, she even mentions drinking Witcher potions, which realistically she shouldn't be able to do, but I suppose it's easy enough to kind of hand-wave that problem away and say, well, she has Elder Blood, the limits of which The Witcher 3 already expand upon greatly. On the topic of Ciri's blood and her potentially being too overpowered, I guess I'll just say that the fact of the matter is, if CDPR want to make a Ciri-based Witcher game, they will balance it in a way that's still fun for the player. Gameplay and lore rarely match one-to-one. In fact, the Witcher games, especially 2 and 3 at times, are a pretty good example of exactly that type of mismatch, and ultimately, it's fine. It doesn't really detract from the experience if done well. I guess what I'm saying is that if we get an announcement down the line that this game will continue the story of Ciri, I don't think I'll be part of the crowd that's extremely upset with the idea. It's a situation where I think it could be done well if handled carefully, but at the same time, Ciri wouldn't necessarily be my preferred choice. I do like her character quite a lot, and more importantly for my own selfish wants, I am interested in the post-Witcher 3 world, and I really hope that era is explored at some point, either with a new character or with someone we already know. I guess where I would actually be somewhat worried about a Ciri announcement more has to do with the fact that this first tease specifically says that this will be the beginning of a new saga, which more than implies that this next game won't just be a one-off before CDPR finds another new direction for the franchise. No, this will more than likely be the start of a new trilogy, which of course is exciting, and that's where I would be of the opinion that a brand new character, or one that we don't already know intimately, is probably for the best. If this were going to be a standalone game telling some focused story CDPR wanted to tell, I have always loved the idea of Eskel as a protagonist for a game. The Witcher 3 sets him up for new adventures in a new location, and I've always thought he would make a great main character for a spin-off. However, similar to Ciri, I don't think Eskel would be the best choice if the plan is for this to kick off a brand new trilogy-length saga. He'd be a better fit for a focused spin-off story. I just hope if this is going to be the beginning of something new and epic, that they really embrace that. I would love to see a truly new location that we haven't seen before, and in terms of setting, there are so many places we know precious little about that are inspired by every corner of Europe, and that's an exciting thing. Obviously, in this tease we see some snow, but how much does that really matter? This game is likely to be set in many different unique locations, which is what I want to see. It's something The Witcher 3 feels like it wanted to do more of, but wasn't quite able to. Okay, I suppose I still need to talk about the possibility of this game being a prequel, one that predates the events of the games and some, most, or all of the books. This is something that definitely feels like a real possibility, and it's an odd situation because going back in time would give CDPR more freedom than moving forward, which is pretty unusual. If you made me choose, I would prefer to see the universe move forward rather than back, even if the characters we know aren't involved in any meaningful way, but it's only a slight preference, and I definitely see the appeal of being able to dive into this world we already love so much during a time when Witchers were at their peak, and that just seems like such an exciting direction for this next game to go that it really does seem very likely. If any of you guys have played the standalone Gwent game, so not the Witcher 3 version, CDPR's Gwent team has been putting a lot of effort into establishing the lore of that era within CDPR's own continuity. From fleshing out the various Witcher schools to creating backstories for dozens of Witchers of the era, it really feels like there's been a pretty outsized effort on building a solid foundation to tell stories in or around that time period, which feels like it might be important when you consider that the director of the standalone Gwent game has now moved on within CDPR to be the lead of this next Witcher title. That seems like it might be relevant, and while I would slightly prefer a game that moves the universe forward, the idea of a game set during the peak of the Witcher schools is also very exciting. Unfortunately, doing a game set that far back does totally remove the possibility of seeing any of the characters we're familiar with outside of Vesemir, Regis, Philippa, and a handful of others, but the good news is that CDPR have already proven that they don't really need Geralt and crew to tell an amazing story within the Witcher universe. Thronebreaker was absolutely incredible, and it's a shame that game sold about 17 copies because the writing was on par with the best of The Witcher 3, and outside of a cameo or two, Thronebreaker didn't exactly rely on fan-favorite characters. Really, the only strong desire that I personally have is that CDPR do choose a set character. New or familiar, I don't care, but I would prefer a set character we can watch grow and develop over CDPR going down the Skyrim or Fallout path. I'm not saying a total blank slate choose your own character thing can't work, but I do think once you make that shift, you're asking for an entirely different type of game, where the priorities are going to be totally different, and you are going to lose several layers of detail and depth that were realistically possible between characters when you have a strong set character like Geralt. Again, that's just my take on it. I could almost ramble on for a full video just about that, but I won't, at least today. More than anything though, I just hope that CDPR tell the story they want to tell. I don't think it's a controversial take to say that The Witcher 3's writing was at its best when CDPR was just doing their own thing and telling their own stories. That is what made The Witcher 3 so special, and obviously it also helped that they had an incredible protagonist to work with throughout all of those short stories. Really, as long as the writing quality and feel of the universe remain intact, I am ready to give just about anything a fair chance, and having something like this on the horizon is truly exciting, both as a fan and as someone who recently started this Witcher channel. This video is actually my 10th overall on the channel, so I suppose that worked out with the announcement. Well guys, that is going to do it for today. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments, and if you did enjoy this video and want more Witcher content in your life, feel free to subscribe. I've got a lot of exciting videos planned now that I can get back on my normal schedule, so subscribing ensures that you'll actually see those. Also, leaving a like does really help get these videos out there and to an audience so I can keep growing this channel, so that is always appreciated as well. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next one.